Hi, welcome to part 2 of this multi-part series on how to package your Python projects. My name is Avile, and I'm the founder and data scientist of Avile Labs, a Seattle-based startup working in the space of machine learning and data engineering. All the code we'll see in this video is checked in at my Bitbucket repo at bitbucket.org/avile/sample-app. And all the stuff that I'm going to talk about here I learned from packaging.python.org, which documents the way you need to distribute your Python projects pretty extensively. Now, in the last part, we learned how to distribute our Python project either as a library or an executable. In this part, we will learn how to add non-code files to our package. Now, we'll talk about two different types of non-code files. The first type are files that live within the package. For example, resource files like CSV files or JPG files that your project has a dependency on. And the second type of non-code files are files that live outside of your project. So these could be things like config files that your code expects to be present in etc sample app/conf on any machine that it runs. So first, let's start with files that live within the package. For that, let's head over to my Bitbucket repo and let's clone the code from there. Now, if you look at the branches, I have two branches here, master and step 1. If we get step 1, it will land us right back where we left off in the last part. So you'll see the familiar directory structure. Okay, so now let's make a directory into our package1, call it res. And let's copy some files over from my temp directory. Now open this project up in PyCharm. You can use any ID you want. This is my favorite ID. And let's quickly take a look at the files we just added. So remember, we added the res directory. We have data1.csv, which has a couple of books in it. Data2.csv, which has a couple of tweets in it. And a picture of the Python logo. Now let's go ahead and use these files in our code. So what I've done here is I've added two methods, process image and process CSV. Process image simply loads the file from our res directory and returns the stat of that image file. And process CSV similarly loads the file from our res directory and concatenates them into an array of lines and returns that array. So that's all these two methods do, nothing too fancy. So let's quickly test this out. So here it is returning the stat result of our image file. And now let's do process CSV. And we see the lines of our CSV concatenated into a single array. In the last part, we saw that we call the setup function in setup.py, which will find all Python packages in the current directory and subdirectories. So anything that does not have a .py extension will be excluded from this list, which means our entire res folder will be excluded. And don't just take my word for it. Let's quickly go and verify this. And before we do that, let's get rid of the egg.info folder by running setup.py with a single parameter called sdist. And this we saw in our last part. And now here is our tar.gz. Let's open it up. And here you can see that inside package1, we should have had a res folder, but we don't. So the question is, how do we ask setup to include our res folder when it's creating our tar.gz installable? And the answer is simple. We just pass another parameter to the setup function called package data, which accepts a hash where the key is the package where we have non-Python files in it. So in our case, it is sample-app.package1. So sample-app.package1. And then we just have a wildcard based way of telling setup which files to pick up. And before we generate our installable, let's just bump up the version number. And there you see it. We have the res folder with all our non-Python files in it. Like we did in the last video, let's deploy this to our production server. So I have this VM running in Azure. We'll pretend that that is a production server and see if it works there. Over. And then let's SSH in. So this red window means that we are on our production box. Let's first get rid of any old sample app versions that might be lying around. Perfect, so our process image works, and so does our process CSV. We just saw how to add files that live within the package to our tar.gz installable. Now let's look at how to add files that live outside of our package. Let's create a directory called conf in our project. Notice that this is outside of our top level Python package. And let's create a couple of conf files in here. It's going to be in America. And now let's use the conf files. Now I've changed sample_app.py, which had our main function in it, to use the conf files that we just created. So we'll pass the name of the conf file to use in our command line argument. So whether it's marvel or DC. And here I'm simply creating the path, which is at etc sample app conf. So the path is etc sample app conf and then marvel.ini. And then I'm simply printing out the config values. Now let's see if this works. But before we do that, we'll need to create that path we just used. So we'll create etc sample app. Here we'll create a symbolic link to our conf files that we are checking in. Now if we run our program, so here it's giving us the values: Iron Man, Captain America. If we do DC, it's Batman and Superman. As before, we need to figure out how to ask setup to include these conf files into the tar.gz installable that it creates. The answer is simple. We create a file with the name of manifest.in on the same level as our setup file. So this is at the same level as setup.py. Here we simply say include conf Now when we create our tar.gz installable by running setup, it will include our conf files. Before we do that, let's as usual bump up the version number. So you can see it's 202 tar.gz now. There you see, you have the conf file with the dc.ini and marvel.ini. Now let's go ahead and install this file on our production VM. Okay, uninstall the previous sample app. So we want to install 202.tar.gz. Now it actually cannot find, this usually means that it could not find our config file in etc sample app conf, obviously because etc sample app does not exist. So what we did was, with the manifest.in file, we told setup to include it in the tar.gz while creating the installable, but we have not told setup where to install this non-Python files when it is installing it on our remote machine. How do we do that, you ask? Simple. Yet another argument. So we pass this argument data files to the setup function, which contains an array of tuples, and each tuple has its first element as the destination location where the files need to be copied, and the second element is another array of all the files that should be copied to this destination location. As usual, let's bump up the version number. Uninstall the old version. Because it needs to create a folder in etc, it will need sudo permissions, so we need to run pip with sudo. Now we should see the conf files here, and if we run this, there you go, we see Batman, Superman. Let's run sapp with Marvel, and we see Iron Man and Captain America. So we just saw how to include files that live outside of our package, and with that we have concluded this part on how to add non-code files to our installable. And in the next and the final part, we'll see how to execute post-install steps on the target machine. Until then, goodbye.